First of all, my name is David Berger. I'm one of the partners in a company called Global Promo. We are a supplier for promotional products. So there's items that you get, there's giveaways, the branded items to help market, promote companies. That's what we do. My company is a supplier to the promotional product industry. So we do different advertising specialties. We do a lot of tech branded USBs and power banks. We do video brochures and video books, computer accessories, and other items that service Fortune 500 companies, school districts, private businesses, the whole gamut. And a lot of our items are typically given away at conferences and meetings, and we've been in business since 2003. Well, my company does a lot of sourcing from factories in China. So when the coronavirus happened, yes, that impacted us very quickly in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the companies that we work with, everything. The timing of it was really bad because, of course, it happened during Chinese New Year's when factories normally shut down for the Chinese New Year holiday. And then on top of that, we had this virus that extended the uncertainty of when factories would reopen. So our supply chain was immediately impacted by coronavirus from the production side, from the supply side. Later on, when we saw that this disease was spreading internationally, of course, it impacted our business from the demand side, from our consumers, because our clients typically order our products for meetings, for conferences, for conventions. And as soon as COVID hit, we knew that things were going to change, and the demand and how our products were used were going to change as well. Definitely, in terms of what we normally would buy, was going to be impacted because production had stopped. Later on, and I'll talk about shipments and transportation, that was later down the road that we learned the impact in terms of transportation and shipping, of course, because airfare, air flights, it's typically how we get our products is by air. And so the normal transportation systems were completely impacted. And so there were multiple ways that COVID impacted my business. Well, I mean, the main struggle is that our normal business model was severely impacted. Creating promotional items for meetings and conferences, conventions, that demand, there was so much uncertainty, and meetings left and right were canceled. So the normal way that we do business and our clients develop business was impacted. And we had to make a lot of adjustments. Well, most definitely. My company, we did a major pivot in what we supply because of COVID. At first, we had a lot of partners in China, and so we knew what was going on in China in terms of the production of the personal protective equipment, PPE. And a lot of the factories in China started to shift what they were producing, the demand for PPE in China, and then it became a global supply shift as well. Initially, we were very reluctant to, get involved in a new product area that we weren't familiar with. But many of our clients, their normal businesses were drying up, and they were being asked by all of their clients for help with PPE. So we started to have our staff go out, our team in China, look at factories, look at supply chains, and find out if we could, import masks, respirators. This is what we initially did. And that was a big learning experience, and there were a lot of challenges related to that we had to deal with as a company. But it really saved our company in many ways. But it was a lot of learning, and the things were very dynamic, very fluid. They would change literally from day to day. What would change were the requirements, what had to be on the packaging, the imprinting, the messaging, and of course, you mentioned earlier the transportation system. It was such a challenge to get products out of China onto planes, onto flights, shipped through normal review processes, that it was almost changing. It seemed very ad hoc, very random change. And it was a big struggle for us to supply our clients with what they were ordering at first. And that was a very difficult situation because we had to find replacements for our clients for things that we ordered. It was very expensive for us. But in the end, I think we learned a lot about this new area, these new demands for markets, and how we as a small, nimble company needed to adjust what we were doing, not with government handouts, but with our own business acumen, our own solutions. It would be nice if there was clarity from the governments, both China and the US, about what was required. And they kept on changing the requirements. There was a lot of ambiguity in it. And as a company, we needed to keep our staff employed. We needed to keep our income coming to sustain our company. We had to pay for our rent. And we were doing this all with a lot of unknown restrictions and a lot of pressure. And it was crazy. I mean, it was really crazy. All of the calls from our clients, dealing with our supply chains, dealing with the flights and transportation. What went up unknowingly was the cost for transportation. It quadrupled on us. Well, what it would cost to do one shipment, say before it would cost you $1, now it costs you $4. And that would change from day to day. And so it's really hard to keep the costs in check, what we were selling the products for, and then the price of the products were changing all of the time. And then eventually what happened was the supply for these items changed so much that the market collapsed. And so now we have a warehouse full of product with a collapsing floor and pricing. So that's been a big challenge for us as a company. It's to pivot, to take the risk. A lot of companies, what you like as a company is you like predictability. You like to know that when you work with a supply chain, that you understand what the costs are for producing the item, for transporting the item, because you sell it to the clients and then you can't keep on changing the prices after you sell it to them. So in a lot of ways, the profits just disappear in some of the orders. But we were, again, flexible enough as a company that we came out, I think, on top of the situation. And now that things have begun to normalize, some of our traditional business in the last quarter has started to return. There's been it's been very dynamic. I mean, at the beginning of the crisis, when we decided as a company to supply PPE, the demand was enormous. I mean, there was calls, the phones were ringing all of the time because people were desperate for these products and we couldn't find them and import them fast enough. I think if we had started earlier, we might have been in a better position. But we were, again, very reluctant to take that risk because it was unknown. What is this new product line? How do we bring it in? So we were cautious, but the demand was through the roof. I mean, people were desperate for these products. And so our sales force were answering questions, learning at the same time. Our operations team was trying to resolve transportation, delivery issues. So everyone was working nonstop until the demand disappeared. And that happened very, gradually over time as other people started to bring, other companies started to produce the PPE. Then, of course, the demand on our staff started to dwindle. And so we looked to, again, as a company, what else could we do? What other areas could we continue to supply? And so we built a wide range of offering with this PPE and other health-related products that were new to our company. And then we started to figure out what can we do with our traditional products. How can we reach out to clients in creative way and find creative applications for the products that we already do?
Yeah, and of course, for the viewers that don't know what PPE exactly stands for.
Personal protective equipment. So these are things that help with fighting against an exposure to COVID or other infectious diseases. And then we started to look at other items such as gloves, face shields, sanitizers, disinfectants, products like that were very different for a promotional product company. There's stories about people showing up at factories with bags of cash. The prices would change every day and people would show up with cash to buy the supply even though we had ordered it. And lots of factories were making promises that turned out to be false promises. And so we had to make a lot of adjustments because it was such a fluid, such a dynamic, ever-changing situation. And the demand globally was so incredible. And then on top of that, I mentioned earlier, the governments kept on changing their requirements and they would change them from day to day. There was no advance warning. We'd have a shipment and they'd say, no, you can't ship this. You need to relabel the packages. And so we'd have to take everything back and then we'd have to reproduce it. And things got stuck in customs. Things got stuck in the transportation system. And that was a very costly situation for us as a company. Well, there's a few things I think we would have done differently. I think we would have started sooner. We would have used different transportation modalities. Instead of shipping by air, we would have had larger stocks sent by ocean, because the cost would be lower. And in fact, the time frame was almost about the same. It's hard to know in hindsight about your suppliers, but I think that's always a risky thing when you work with someone new and they're doing a new product. You don't know how credible, how reliable they are. So that's something I think in hindsight, not that we wouldn't necessarily do different. We're always trying to verify and qualify our suppliers. But sometimes you don't know that. But the two things definitely we would have ordered sooner, we would have sent it differently, and I think that would have reduced some of the challenges we experienced. Well, it was a very interesting. We had prepared for this as we knew that we were going to go to having people work from home. And the technology that we have was very suitable for that. So our staff, we were able to, have phone calls transferred seamlessly. So it really didn't matter where they were. And a lot of our business is done by email and by phone. So the fact that people didn't have to go to the office really wasn't a setback for us as a company. Patience and ethics, that's a good question. I think we've always had to be patient in these challenging situations. It called for a lot of patience. I'm very grateful for our clients. They were extremely patient. They were extremely understanding. And that was a very positive situation. Of course, some were very frustrated by the delays, but for the most part, our clients understood these challenges. We were all going through them at the same time. I think it is disappointing when you expect to get something and there's delays, of course, but they were very patient. I think it was more difficult for us to disappoint our clients. And everyone on our team worked very hard, from our China staff to our US staff. So I think we all had patience. And ethics, we always try to be very clear and honest. We never lie to our clients. We always try to explain the situation as best we know it. Things, again, changed frequently. And so that created a lot of challenges. But as long as you're honest with your clients, they give you a lot of flexibility and patience in return. We always were straightforward with what we were finding, what we were doing, what we could supply. And I think that's, again, an ethical way to do business in a challenging situation. It's been a very difficult situation, and I don't necessarily think my professional life changed as much as the personal life. Our family had to adapt to a very difficult situation. And again, I think for our son, our student, that was this whole distance learning, not being able to go out, not being able to interact. It's been the hardest thing of all of this. But professionally, I think we are working in a different way. I wouldn't say it's more difficult or less different. It's just different. And we, again, have a lot of flexibility. And as a company, because we're a small company in how we operate, so we've always been able to adapt. But I think personally, it's been a challenging thing not to be able to interact and socialize in the same way as before COVID. We look at the business relationships that we've had in the past and how we were able to build upon those relationships, how we were able to open up new doors with a new product line. And I think that's a very positive thing in terms of establishing new client relations, developing new markets, but knowing that this is a temporary situation, always hopefully fostering a positive experience and outcome for our clients so they're willing to come back to us when the traditional product lines that we sell come back, the demand for those. Not so much social media, but we do a lot of email communication. And I think there's been some social media, but it wasn't necessarily effective for us. I mean, there's been some social media just dealing with these new products, PPE that I mentioned, and that didn't generate a lot of business for us, honestly. Social media never has been an effective tool since we're a supplier. We don't work with what we call the end users, the final decision makers, but we do more business to business. In terms of the way we communicate, we did do a lot of outreach to our clients through e-blasts, letting them know products we were adding, and then the traditional way that we communicate as well. Traditionally been through email and telephone. Of course, we can't meet in person, which is one way that we used to meet with our clients. Our staff would go out, travel, visit our clients. We'd have our own conferences and workshops, and all of that has ceased. But we are looking at ways to market our products in new ways, and we haven't really gone too deeply into that yet. For us as a business, we came up with a new way of having our company function where we have less people going into the office. So instead of having everyone go back to the office, we're continuing to telecommute. The salespeople still work from home for the majority, and we have daily Zoom conferences, which is actually a helpful way to improve communication. We're meeting more frequently as a team than we ever did before because of COVID, and discussing strategies and experiences. In terms of opening safely, we don't deal directly with the public, so that's not so much a concern for us, but we do have a warehouse, we do distribution, and so we are interacting with our vendors, shippers, but we're not really meeting face to face still with clients. And hopefully that will change in terms of having those opportunities. I've met with a few clients in person who've typically been outdoors. It's a lot less in-person meetings than we did in the past. Oh, the majority of those meetings were planned before COVID. I was going to be traveling to New York to visit clients, to Washington, and all of those meetings were canceled because of how business has changed. First of all, they canceled because of the concern about the transmission and exposure and infection. But I think that how business are operating now may be changed for the long term. So it's going to be very different in terms of how we interact and meet with our clients in the future. And I don't think that's been decided or figured out yet. I think the traditional demand for our products because of COVID has essentially disappeared. And now it's up to clients to figure out other ways to communicate and use the materials that we produce to communicate with their clients. And so we have a lot of video products, and there's been a lot of high demand for those products because that's another way that companies can tell their story, to share information, and they're doing it by mailing these videos, these video booklets to their clients, as opposed to traditionally meeting them face to face. And still the demand for the PPE, the safety equipment is still there and it's pretty high. And we also do we added some products recently to help with video conferencing, online meetings, like the webcams. And so we're trying to continue to adapt what we sell to the way that people are interacting and interfacing with one another, and still helping clients to brand and promote their business. That's a good question. So we've always looked at the market. We looked at what's selling on Amazon, where there's demand. We also, our clients coming to us and ask for certain products. And then we have our sourcing team overseas look at what's being developed. And then we decide what's suitable. We have decisions to bring in new products, to test them, to market them, and see what kind of responses we get. During the challenging times, we were dealing with being as honest with our staff about the challenges that were emerging and that were confronting them. And that was, again, some of it was very frustrating for them. And being honest, understanding the situation is the best way, I think, to deal with some challenges. As we get through those situations, it's looking at sales, ways to continue to foster a positive relationship with your clients, is what we basically emphasize as a way to look at the experience and share experiences about what's working and how we can build upon those experiences to have positive outcomes was another aspect. And that's part of what I refer to as why we're doing our daily Zoom meetings, to talk about these experiences, what worked and what doesn't work, and build upon what works and learn from those other experiences as well. Well, we've always been a small and nimble company, and it's hard to predict the future. It's hard to judge what's going to happen and what we can do about it. Over the years, we've tried to build up our domestic production capacity. So when there's supply chain issues, transportation, or when countries shut down, we would have stock and we'd be able to do, again, still maintain our business. And demands change over time. The markets change over time. So sometimes we'd order things, we'd warehouse them, they'd sell well, sometimes they wouldn't sell so greatly, and then we're stuck with that inventory. And so it's trying to, always look at the market, look at the demands, be prepared for those changes, but not overextend yourself as a company. It is, I think, one of the important patterns of our own business, how we've always ran our business. It's hard to predict if there's, again, a global shutdown, what the cause is, what the situation is. I think the lesson from this past few months is that we've been very adaptable and very flexible. And as long as you're a company that's willing to adapt to changes and find new solutions, hopefully these will be positive changes and help sustain your company. And that's what worked for us.
David Lee, President and CEO of D&L Health Solutions. We're a professional service organization for healthcare. Well, when I first heard about it, right, I think like most of us really didn't understand it, how it would impact on all of us. So I think when I first heard of it, really didn't know the severity of the disease. I think over time, as we all kind of learned the severity of it, yeah, I think it had an impact. Well, I think like most industries, right, was really trying to, in the healthcare, right, it made an impact, right, from emergency situations to fighting the virus. And so I think everyone, at least in healthcare, right, trying to understand it and then be able to navigate through the complexities of it. But has an impact into all industries, including healthcare, but particularly, right, figuring out what, right, you can no longer have face-to-face oftentimes, right, and trying to really understand, right, and bringing on new technology as well, right, how do you adapt to the new technology in healthcare? Yeah, I think learn a lot more about the virus, learn, that healthcare, right, is pivoting and readjusting and kind of recalibrating as well. Some of the things that used to be done mostly face to face, but now, right, how do you effectively work remotely and interact with patients and with, physicians remotely? Yeah, I feel it was positive, right? I think in healthcare, a broken system in the US here that needed a lot of fixing, right? And this kind of accelerated the change that was required in healthcare. So I think in a positive way, how impact the business was actually improved on business. Every sector of healthcare was looking to adapt to the needed changes, but many of these healthcare sectors did not know how to begin. So that helped at least on the business side for us. I'm not sure, what we could have done better. And I think a lot of it is getting, information and education around the virus and how to, protect ourselves and our community. So in general, I'm not sure, right? And part of it is our own responsibility as individuals and citizens to manage our own health. And so if we believe or not believe in wearing masks and having a barrier, that's our prerogative. I believe that as citizens and individual, we have a responsibility to keep ourselves and our families safe. I think technology, right, adapting and putting the right technology in place so that, the coordination of care in multiple, not just the care coordination piece, right, and integrating different systems and putting systems together was important in making sure that all these fragmented systems communicated with one another in a more seamlessly way. So I think technology was a big factor to, well, it's always been a big factor, but with the coronavirus, right, it just accelerated the need of technology much sooner, and then getting adoption was critically important as well. I think when there's a lot of uncertainty, I think communication is critical in multiple facets, and not just to the public, but to clients and to family members. And I think communication is a big component to and a requirement getting the message out. No, I think there's, with more people at home, right, there's more visibility, things like LinkedIn and Facebook. But I haven't really personally done a whole lot on social media. But I think, with more people at home, it's being used, right? And so I think many organizations are looking at those type of platforms and how to get those marketing strategies out there. My, current state is a balance, right, of doing things that are remotely and some things that I'm actually physically going into the clients to help. So I think for those who are open and, still taking the precaution of protecting each other, and there's some times that are necessary to go into some of these offices. But other than that, it's a balance of managing the work at home and versus the times that are required to be at an office. I think it varies from business to business, right? In the industry, I should say industry to industry. We have to really look at the numbers. And one of the critical numbers is the inpatients, the influx with COVID cases that entered into the hospital. That's a number that we should not lose track, right? As the number increases, we have to be cautious and before we open up completely. But I think there are certain areas, right? And if you're dining outside and there's still possibilities of doing certain things outside, and not in close quarters until the numbers, kind of flatten and decrease and continue to decrease, right? At least in the state of California, those are the numbers that we still have to, look at and review it and manage through. I don't think that has changed. If it's an individual or from our organization to make decision has much. But I think on the flip side and on the client side, right, I think it's certain things, right, availability and focus on certain areas have improved. And, many are still working from home. So it has made it easier, right, to kind of manage through some of those things and look at availability to reach out to certain clients. But personally, right, I don't think it's impact our decision making or my decision making as an organization. I think it was a shock, right? And I think when you have mandates in place, right, it's understanding, right, the severity of it. I think when it came down to shutting down, and I think a lot of people realize, right, including myself, the severity of the virus. Not only surprising, but understanding that the severity of it. In healthcare, it helped to accelerate some things, right? At least from a technology, and it helped to accelerate adoption that oftentimes in healthcare, it is slow moving, right? And so this kind of accelerated the things that needed to be changed in healthcare and move things along. So I think it's helped, right, in that sense of kind of moving things in a positive way, at least in healthcare. Nothing changed on our end. Much more in aligning what the needs were for the clients than anything else. Just as far as providing, right, if it's, through a Zoom meeting or meeting in person or more telephonic, right, those are some of the changes, at least from the technology. But our model hasn't changed in that sense. Yeah, I think so, right? And I think it's still, things to be learned, but I think we need to be locked down, more so. I think we'll be prepared much more.
My name is Billy Chen. I'm the co-founder of two brands, two totally distinct partnerships. A restaurant brand in the food and beverage industry called Pokeworks. We have about 50 locations right now across the states. And also another brand, it's more of an umbrella brand. It's called Nexus Brands Group. You're never going to hear about it, but the brands underneath it are well known in the body art space, tattoos, and also pet grooming as well. Tatsel, Kingpin Tattoo Supply, Eternal, Critical Power Supply, Barber DTS, that's under tattoo. For pet, it's Ryan's Pet Supplies, Comfort Groom, Nature Specialties, and that's the pet grooming division, and that's all under Nexus Brands Group. When I first heard about it, I really didn't, to be honest, I didn't really take it too serious. But then when it, started spreading like crazy, that's when we started really taking things really serious. So at first, cautious, but really wasn't something that was a huge concern at first. I did not at first. I thought that it was going to remain overseas, primarily in China, and I didn't really think much of it. I think we've had SARS in the past, so we didn't expect, they didn't really come over. So I thought it was just going to be one of those situations. For the restaurant division, that's been probably the most challenging, I would say. That, no one wanted to go out to eat. It mandated restaurant closures. We're still dealing with it right now, even. For the pet and tattoo division, at first in the beginning, it was really concerns on not necessarily the executives and marketing or finance, because those could be you could work from remote, but it was more the logistics side, warehouse, fulfillment, stuff like that. Yes, for restaurants, absolutely. Almost all locations had to be shut down at some period of time. Now we're starting to see some locations open. For the pet and the grooming side, which is Nexus, those brands, there were some shutdowns as far as the parlors and the grooming shops, but we were fortunate that they were still open. They were not officially open. So in other words, they closed the doors, shuttered the windows, but they were still taking on clients. A little rebellious there. Well, the time frame was around March-ish, right? That's when everything was kind of shut down. A lot of that was mandated. A lot of it was also, from local governments, counties and cities. For us, it was also for us just to be careful of everything. We care about our employees, so we also shut down. Whether or not the government was mandating it or not, we were doing it as well, just as a precaution to make sure our employees were safe. Yeah, absolutely it did. We learned that technology has a huge play. A lot of Zoom meetings. I had 5-6 Zoom meetings in a row, like every day. It was, Zoom helped a lot. I have to give kudos to, Zoom, WhatsApp, those FaceTime, all those. Technology was really vital as far as communication when everyone was not in the office. Another learning experience was also giving back to the community. So my partners and I, as we're, on the restaurant side on PokeWorks, my partner's there, which is different from the tattoo and pet, by the way. So just totally different ownerships that I'm with. But on the restaurant side, because the restaurants were shut down, there was less, a lot of standstill in that sense. We did stuff to help the community. My partners raised, at that time, masks were really hard for the healthcare workers. We raised a significant amount, almost $200,000 in inventory to help hospitals and first responders and stuff like that. So that was a very proud moment. So I really felt good about that, stepping up to help the community in need. Yeah, for our tattoo and grooming supply company, it was the supply chain was definitely harder. We have a lot of products, not all, but a lot of products coming from overseas in China. So obviously China was hit first. So it was hard for us to get products. And, right now we're still dealing with a backlog of that. So supply chain definitely was affected, supply chain is basically all the products that come, the whole planning of getting the products here to be able to sell. So that's where we had a lot of hiccups. Shipping companies were lagging as well. So a lot of infrastructure was, it was definitely affected. It was a challenging time. That's a good question. I think hindsight is always 20/20, but overall, I think we handled it very well. We are, the pet and tattoo, surprisingly, we're still achieving better than last year over year, which is pretty unheard of for many industries. So we've been very fortunate there. So yeah, overall, I think we handled everything correctly there. The restaurant right now, we're still struggling, of course, that division, just because of closures and people not being able to eat out as much, depending on the location. So it's a mixed bag, but overall, I think we handled everything very well. Outside of preventing COVID, I think we did everything. We were responsible. Everyone was wearing, we have people wearing masks, temperature checks. So I think we handled it very well. Out of we probably have about 500 employees in the grooming and the tattoo supply side, and also another 500 or so employees, maybe a little bit more on the restaurant side. And I could count that we've only had one situation where COVID did affect at a workplace at one of our locations. So I think we handled it. Given those type of numbers, we did a really, really good job. Yeah, I think masks are the science, you look at the science, masks are important. You have to wear masks. I think it shouldn't be politicized. I want to add that in there. It's pure science. Masks help, and we make sure our employees wear masks and also temperature checks, before coming in. Yeah, that's a good question. On the personal side, it's been challenging when you have two young kids and you're trying to conduct meetings, and sometimes they barge in, they're screaming in the background, and so that can be challenging. And also on top of that, homeschooling, because the schools are shut down. During that, it still is kind of in a way. They're doing the Zoom stuff, but it's really difficult when you have a 6-year-old trying to pay attention via Zoom. So that's been really the most challenging, I would say, is really that the family life with young children with going through COVID. For business, it's been okay. With Zoom, I don't deal with warehouse and customer service teams that require usually them to be on site. I've been fortunate. My direct reports are usually the executive level, so it could be communicated via Zoom or phone calls and stuff like that. So, but as far as I do know that it's really difficult. The warehouse levels and the logistics side. And I've heard it's difficult because they have to be there to fulfill orders and stuff like that. So, but that doesn't affect me, thankfully. Good managers to handle that. But yeah, that's I'd say the personal life, the children, handling the whole family life has been really difficult. It's kind of funny, actually. Zoom meetings, I felt actually increased efficiency. It allowed me to hop from one meeting to another pretty quickly. You think about this, you go to the office, there's a time that you're commuting, right? And then there's a time of commuting. The round trip actually takes up a lot of your time. It could potentially take up, a lot of your time. It takes me about 35, 40 minutes to get to my office that I usually go to. And then you multiply that by 2, that's an hour and a half of my day commuting. I gain my time by working at home in that sense, right? So interestingly, if you look at it from that perspective, then it's actually been pretty efficient and get right down to it. I'm usually pretty patient with business in general. I felt that the team members did really well during this time. So in a sense, I didn't really have to worry too much about patience in a sense. Like I had really good leaders to basically work through everything. And so, yeah, I can't really complain given the circumstances. It really didn't try my patience. I was very fortunate in that sense. I think we were all just working, if anything, we bunkered down, we worked harder given the situation. Team really pulled together during this tough time. Going back to, as a business, what we did was instead of spending more money on advertisements and marketing dollars, what we did was we really focused on kind of being supportive of, helping the community out. We also did some stuff to help out the homeless over in downtown, at Skid Row, by donating medical equipment and supplies. Like it was so ethically, yeah, we wanted to do what could help. I mentioned about the healthcare situation at the time. They had no masks. It was really hard to get masks. We really helped source that. I'm really proud of that, to help out, the community in need during really tough times. So for marketing and social media, what we did was we really focused on a campaign, Artist Strong, at least for the tattoo brands. What we did was we really focused on a message from all the artists. We did clips of everybody. They shot it from their phone. We edited it. It was really cool. It was just kind of like, hey, we know it's really tough. Can't go out and do your job, but we're all here to support each other, and so our advertisement spend on social media and what, on Google, we actually stopped it for a few months, right when the mid-March happened, and really just focused on just laying out the brands that we're supportive of each other, that we're trying to help, we want to all be there for each other during this tough time. Yeah, I think that it really is a regional situation. It depends on your county, your city, your state. There's certain states and counties that have been very responsible, and there's certain places that almost believe that COVID doesn't exist. So I think it really is regional, and we should be tackled that way. So for the restaurants, for PokeWorks, it just kind of depends on the locations. So I would have to say, okay, out of the 50 location, I'd say, okay, this area might be a little bit safe. Obviously, you got to take your precautions, but then there's certain areas I don't know, this is a good time to open up. So it really is regional. For the logistics, the grooming and the tattoo supply brands, they're also scattered in different parts of the world. For that one, I would say that there's certain areas, I think that with that, as long as we take the right precautions, it should be able to open up. It's mostly fulfillment, really. It's a whole system of warehouse fulfillment, right? We sell products, and so I believe that as long as we put in the right guidelines and safety measures, it should be able to open up. It's fairly hard, yeah, right? Because you have to be responsible to prevent an outbreak within your business. You got to be responsible for your employees' health. So all these decisions is really difficult because you're talking about lives, so it's definitely not easy to make these types of decisions. The global shutdown, yeah, obviously, I think it really caught everybody off guard. I mean, that's just the truth. I think I didn't expect the pandemic to accelerate so fast, and yeah, it caught us off guard. I don't know any business that could say that they prepared for this. If they do exist, and it's probably very rare. But amongst my peers, yeah, it was a surprise, and COVID came out of nowhere. But I felt that how we reacted to COVID was, overall well done. Yeah, the employees were all understanding of the situation. They all abided by the rules and all that stuff. We've been fortunate overall, there wasn't anyone that, they understood, so they were very understanding. Some were not able to work for a while. We had to also do, for Nexus Breads, that group, we had to initiate a pay cut for salaries and hourly workers for shorter. At the time, we didn't know how long it was going to be, but everyone had to take a reduction in pay, and everybody was totally understanding about it. They still really appreciated they still had a job and all that stuff. Yeah, so it was just kind of like, hey, let's just be supportive of each other, be safe. Although the advice was really health is number one. Career is important, but you got to live a healthy life to enjoy the fruits of your career success. So it was really just. The advice was just stay safe at all costs. Wear a mask, social distance. Make sure they also do temperature checks, so in case you don't spread it within the work environment. That was primarily the main advice during this pandemic, was just try to stay safe and healthy. I think that mask mandate, just requirement is a must. Obviously, do all the stuff with, everything in personal protective. Because at the time, if you think about it, when this pandemic hit, the CDC was even advising not to wear masks. They said it didn't do anything, which is a total wrong answer. But now what we learned was it does help. And so that's going to be immediate, right? If another pandemic hits, is masks on, social distance, obviously, and certain positions may not need to necessarily go into the office. Then you start firing up Zoom again, right? Have a good home office setup. That's more for probably upper management and the executives. But but as far as warehouse type employees that need to fulfill orders, we got to make sure whatever that next pandemic is, that before they can come in and start fulfilling orders, we need to understand the virus a little bit more. For the restaurants, obviously, you just got to stop it, understand what it is, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Thank you for
All right, man. Thanks.
the opportunity.
Thanks,
for
yeah.
interviewing us. And yeah, that was
Cool.
great.